there had been criticism of Robert E. Howard, most famously H.R. Hayes in the New York Book Review, who said he was Superman on a psychotic bender. But it was all book reviews, and it was all, even Howard's biggest fans, if you read the introductions, it was all, well, this stuff's really fun, but there's no ideas in it. Don't go looking for any. This is the first guy who showed us that, oh no, there's some really deep stuff in here. And without further ado, I'm going to let him talk about it. His name is Charles Hoffman. He's our guest of honor this year.
Hello. Does that sound okay, or does it echo?
Yeah,
oh, okay. Okay, I've been asked to talk about my essay. It was originally entitled Conan the Existentialist, and later Conan the Existential. Some of you know bits and pieces of the history of it and how it came to be written. So I guess, I'll tell the whole story, behind it. I wrote it when it was published when I was like 19, when I was a college student. I attended a small liberal arts college in Pittsburgh, Point Park College, which is now Point Park University. They have like 15 buildings in downtown Pittsburgh. When I went there, they had like 2. But I majored in English, and though we didn't declare minors, but I ended up taking like a philosophy course like nearly every semester, because I liked the instructor and I thought it very interesting. And one of the classes I took had to do with like existentialism, which, as you may or may not know, like in the 50s was like kind of like a hot topic, of discussion, even if it, wasn't well understood. Like, and you hear mentions of it from time to time, and things having to do with the culture of the 50s. In the movie Lolita, like the narrator mentions, like at that time existentialism was all the rage. And there's a movie I'm dying to see on DVD someday called Bachelor Party, in which Carolyn Jones, who warped me, plays a character called the Existentialist, and got an Oscar nomination for it. But existentialism, as I understood it, was like it's defined as the philosophy that existence precedes essence, which is like a kind of a terse definition, in need of clarification. Basically, what it means is, we're born into the universe with no set purpose, and it's something we have to determine ourselves, each of us as individuals. And primarily, it's an atheistic philosophy, but some philosophers have reconciled it with faith, in the sense that, maybe this, meaning, is on our shoulders. Maybe it is, in fact, why we're here. So, anyway, as an attitude more than like a formal philosophy, I noticed like, it's like talk about like the absurdity of human existence and meaningless, and having to forge ahead and create your own meaning and purpose in life. And I noticed, well, gee, I see a lot of this in Howard and Conan. And I eventually drafted out an article, and I sent it to AMRA, the little Conan fanzine, which we talked about on the previous panel, which was, I sent it there because it was really the only place to send it to. There was nothing else. And I mean, boy, it was like the bee's knees if you loved like dirty limericks about John Carter of Mars and, and stuff like that. But anyway, I'd point out like the reason it makes Howard's Conan story so distinctive as opposed to the pastiche stories was this like grasp of like the existential attitude that he had. And I did have to like throw them a bone. Like in the opening up pages, I say like, well, the stories by DeCamp and Carter are like, for the most part, pretty good. And like I think it was Fred Blotzer who said, well, what was Hoffman thinking when he said that? And okay, well, I'm going to tell you. I was thinking about whose little playground Amber was. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really think that. I just had to throw him a little something. But basically, as I said, the oldest type of story is like the tale of heroes, gods, monsters. But in creating his, modern form of heroic fantasy, Howard sort of realized that you cannot present these sorts of, heroic swordsman type characters the way people did in a vanished world where people lived and thought and felt differently. And that's why he portrayed Conan the way he did, as I say in the article, a self-determining man, alone in a hostile universe. You don't, and it's something you don't see even in like sword and sorcery and fantasy that was written after Howard. Michael Moorcock comes to mind. He's like, okay, Ulrich, the Lords of Order need you to do thus and so. Howard, broke away from all that. He was an innovator in that sense. Another person I think was like a real innovator was like Bruce Lee. In like the martial arts movies, if you've seen like the old ones where they go like zipping and flying around, the characters Bruce Lee broke away from that. He got rid of the acrobats and brought in like club fighters like Chuck Norris and Bob Wall, made it grittier, more realistic, and that's sort of what Howard did, and I tried in my clumsy little 19-year-old way to point that out, and I sent it to Amra and. I didn't know whether they'd use it or not. I didn't really think they would, but I got a postcard from it, and I remembered, thanks for the article. We'll use it, Sue. S-O-M, there's no N on it. Stay wicked on Wotan's Day, George Schithers. So it was like a big thrill when I got a hold of that. And I came to write the second version of this article. Sometime later, I was contacted by a couple of people at Harvard University, and they were putting out a magazine called Crimmers. The Harvard, the Harvard Journal of Popular Culture. Academic journal from Harvard. They sent me a sample copy. The cover article was Hogarth's Last Tarzan. It was about Bern Hogarth. They had this really nice illustration on it. It's so classy looking, and they said oh, would you like to we'd like you to do a revised version of it for our journal. I'm there, wow, okay, this is kind of like a feather in my cap to do something for an actual academic journal from Harvard, no less. So I revised it, and I did what they wanted me to. I expanded on some things, and sent it to them. Didn't hear from them. And a while later, they said, oh, by the way, we're graduating. We're starting our own magazine called Ariel. We would like to use it there instead. And I'm, okay. But, really, I thought, oh, damn it. That's never going to come out. And that was the last I heard of it for a while. And, they didn't contact me again. I didn't hear from them. I stumbled upon the printed article only by accident, in one of the first comic book stores in the United States, this being the mid-'70s. Once a week or every 2 weeks, I had to drive out to a place called, a town called Etna, which was very remote from the town where I lived, to get comics and specialty items because there were no other stores like that. And I went in there one day and saw the magazine Ariel sitting there, and I saw the title, Ariel, and what? Could that be it? And I picked it up, and I looked on the back, and it had the Conan the Existential on there. And it got a pretty good reaction over the years. People have told me it inspired them to think about Conan and Howard more seriously, which meant like a lot to me. And also from a different perspective, a friend once told me, a younger friend, that it was like the first work of literary criticism that he had ever read. Like he said, I would not have gone on to read Leslie Fiedler or Northrop Frye or Harold Bloom or Camille Pally if I had not read this first. So, that felt very good in a different sort of sense. But it's been credited with launching Howard criticism. I'm not aware of much serious writing on Howard that was done prior to it. There may well have been, but I'm just not aware of it. Mostly the RGC was sort of like how did things work in the Hyborian Age and stuff like that. Good old Elsbrady Camp said something like, well, the characters wear leather so much, this must mean that their textiles were poor. I'm there, well, okay. But for all its flaws, I'm still pretty proud of it because let's see, in writing about a character of this type, you just you just can't rehash mythology as people tend to do, because if you look at the ancient myths, they're the gods take a very direct hand in everything. Whereas Howard, he sort of really got a handle on this when he, created Conan's deity Crom, whose primary purpose is just to swear oaths by. Crom's undivided attention is the last thing you want. But I've noticed that there have been other references to pop cultural characters having sort of an existential flavor to it, particularly The Man with No Name, Sergio Leone westerns, who's very similar to Conan in some respects. I think people did remark on that at the time, and I think both the works of both Howard and Lovecraft display some aspect of existential thought. It's just that the people who studied existentialism, in the 40s and even the 50s, popular culture, it was just totally below their radar. There was simply no way they could have been aware of any of this. And I think existentialism was post the turn of the century, post World War I, it was really just something was sort of in the air at the time as an attitude. And you didn't have to be a highbrow author to get that. In fact, the people in the lower middle class, they were sort of living right on the edge, and they could have a better grasp of a hostile universe and having to make some sort of meaning and purpose for yourself. It simply amazes me that Lovecraft isn't regarded as a major existential writer, because he's certainly well known enough, but people haven't got it yet. But meaningless cosmos, purposeless universe, it's all there. And he was very upfront about it. But as someone else has said, I think it was Thomas Reed, Lovecraft sort of failed to take his thesis beyond like a negative impasse. He was content to say that we're doomed, all is meaningless, and like sort of let it go at that, which is fine because he was writing horror fiction. Like some people observed, like like somebody called Wilson said, well, like Lovecraft was a sick man because he was so dour and like pessimistic and nihilistic. But he's sort of like missing the point. Like he was a horror writer. This is what he considered horrible. Like he also wrote the Dreamland fantasies, which don't do a whole lot for me either, frankly. But you have to consider them in evaluating the whole picture. In fact, I'll throw this in, like the most Lovecraftian thing I've seen lately is there's Allstate Insurance commercials with a guy who's like the personification of mayhem. Have you seen that? I was watching those and like that's like Lovecraftian. Like if this guy was to reveal his true form, it would blast your sanity. But let's see. Getting back to Howard, he created a character like Conan who was like, the product of a very harsh environment, who was like equal to the task of facing up to like a hostile universe with no apparent meaning. And this is, pretty much what I said in my short essay. I just wanted to make like a very point out that he made kind of was like a very distinct break from like the older type of heroes who were like they had their noble quest, they had their noble destiny, they had their noble purpose. Conan really has no noble destiny or purpose. He's just out for himself. But he does have like a certain knack for doing the right thing. I mean, when he overcomes something like monster or horrors, which we can regard as symbolic of a hostile universe, he's just trying to do it to get past them, to get like some treasure or something. But he is a hero because if he hadn't done that, they'd still be like skulking around, waiting to do bad things.